Howdy, YouTube folks. It's your friendly neighborhood girl, Ellen. My light might bring out the more pale complexions of my skin, so kind of just let me adjust that a little bit. There we go. But, I thought I'd bring you a video because I believe it was 3 videos ago I had mentioned in an update how I was working on an antique scale because I was thinking about getting into the orchard business, and I thought this might be helpful for some folks because I reviewed that video and I'm pretty sure I uploaded it. Sometimes I forget, as I've said, I'm sporadic, but I thought I'd make this video because I thought this would be helpful for some people who don't already know it, is what I was going to say. I blanked there for a minute because my mind sometimes spaces out a little bit as I get older. I mean, stuff like that happens. But anyways, so for those of you who don't know this and say you're getting into the starting of farming from and could use this advice, the reason why I think it's very crucial to have a scale of some kind, and you'll find this mostly pertains to berry farm, vineyards and apple orchards, and obviously oranges too, like orange groves, and pear trees if you were doing a fruit farm with like any kind of fruit trees, really. I believe they use this method, but it's mainly, at least in my area, it's mainly for like berries, grape vineyards, or like, wine vineyard, grape measurements and stuff, and apple orchards. And yes, you'll find that I will preface this, a lot of berry farms are pick your own, so do you really need a scale for that? Yes, it is important, obviously, because that's how you weigh to find out your pricing at the front counter. So they'll usually have like a countertop scale, but what you also may not pay that much attention to, when say you go to a pick your own berry farm and they obviously are going to weigh you on that scale so they know how much pounds is what, so that they can know what to charge you for that little crate, whatever material it is. I forget, that like cardboard now or something. I think they used to be like little woven, like thin wood. But anyways, when they're doing that, they're actually recording on a piece of paper so they can keep track of the yield from that plant. The reason I believe this to be a crucial method is, like, take for instance, if you're a winery and like the winery I was working at, and you're processing the grapes to make wine, and you want to know how much you yielded out of that batch. I think that's a very crucial thing, just to keep track of how much you're getting in and how productive your business is, because given that it's usually only one season when all that stuff is able to be harvested, that it's important. Same with like apple trees. And what we would do at the winery when we were doing that, obviously I wouldn't be manning the clipboard. I would just be helping, bringing them to the scale, and there would always be someone there manning the clipboard and looking at the scale and saying, hey, okay, put this one on, okay, you can move it off, put the next one on, kind of thing. Like, yep. They would usually go, okay. Like, this one woman would say, okay, that used to man it, and then this guy that worked there, he would go, yep. That's when you knew to pull it off after they had gotten the weight. But the reason they were keeping track of the weights out of the yield of each day they got grapes like that, say if they got a full trailer load like they really wanted, depending whatever it was for that day, that way they could keep track over time of all the weights, add them up, and say, well, I got this as a total yield for the whole year, which helped in calculating how much of a cost it was into the production of the harvest and what they made for income back that year altogether from that season of harvesting. And obviously there's other things they would do to keep track of the plants and other things for the income end of the winery. But just about talking about scales, and I'll touch on some other things, especially with apple orchard when I get into it, but I can also get into some other logistics with berry farming, which can come later. But anyways, that's kind of why they had the scales. So that's why I believe it's crucial if you're getting into any kind of that type of farming, like especially apple and berry and grape farming, raising grapevines, that it's crucial you have those means to weigh, especially if you're selling them to a winery, because you want to know what you yielded that year. So out of weighing measurements, so you know between both of you, because that's what they had this one guy that would sell his grapes to them. He's a neighbor of mine, very, very nice fellow, and I helped out at their vineyard too when I could, for the winery. He would bring his grapes there and they would weigh them, and then they would tell him what they could pay for them. But that's a very crucial system, I believe, especially if you're buying and or selling grapes. It's just a good practice to have that skill, even if you're not processing wine. But yeah, the reason they had that was just so they could keep track of their income, needless to say. And to me, that's a very crucial thing to a farm like that, and that's why I feel you need to have them. That's why I plan on fixing up that antique scale to use for my apple orchard. And yes, I could go out and buy a brand new top of the line, greatest honor scale, but because it's basically going to be a side business to my antique shop, selling apples, and me still having some part of farming in my blood, because I've farmed for years and it's in my blood, no matter how much I want to slice it. And how many, there might be days where I'm like, oh, I'm glad I don't do this anymore. There's times when I really miss it because it's something I've done. I've done it. I enjoy it. It's an addiction, and I admit that in its own way. That's what I feel like it is, an addiction. But anyways, so yeah, if you're in a farming situation like that, it's very crucial to have that, because you want to keep track of your yield for that day and that week, keeping track each day what you get and measuring it out. Especially say if you were like a commercial apple orchard would be another example, where you, similar to the winery, where you hire people and you pay them. You want to keep track of that, so you know your income's coming in. And like I said, at the end of the year, you just tally up all your weights and what you get. So that was basically why we worked with scales at the winery. And they've been doing that for years. Like when I mentioned about, the scale was probably originally used to weigh grain, because that farm had been in their family for generations, and the grandfather was a dairy farmer before that was even established as a winery. And anyways, that scale was probably used for weighing grain, because that's oftentimes 9 times out of 10, that's what dairy farmers would buy those for, is like any grain or anything like that they were giving their cattle. They would weigh it with scales like that, so they could keep track of how many pounds of grain they bought, so they knew if they needed more grain, which is also another good way to keep a scale. If you're a dairy farmer and you're not a big commercial one, it also doesn't hurt to have a scale around. If say you buy bags of grain, so you know how much grain, the weight of the grain you bought that time, so you can keep track of it. So if you ever run out, you know how many pounds you bought the last time. You can just look back that and say, oh, I'll just buy the same amount, and that'll also help you figure out how much grain you should keep around your farm. Say if you buy grain for your cattle and don't grow it yourself, so you know how much you should keep around at any given year. So yeah. But anyways, so that was basically my synopsis of uh, of how scales work on a farm and their usefulness to those types of farming, as I mentioned, mainly like vineyards, orchards, obviously dairy farm, but orchards and berry farms. So I hope this video was informative, and I hope it gave you a little insight into farming if you're trying to get into it as a business. As I've stated before, and I think I made a video on it, but I will preface this again. Just remember, farming is an income and not a profit. So if you want to get into the business of farming and you want to have your own farm and you want to make it a local farm that makes money, just know farming, you only get out of farming what you put into it. So if you invest your full, I always used to like to say when I worked at a job, I would jokingly say to people, I've invested my full 300%, which is true because I was a very loyal worker. I've always tried to be a very loyal worker, but you know what I mean. That was always been my running joke when I've worked for people, especially at the winery when they would say, "Oh, did really good this year, buddy. We're so proud of you. We're glad you're here," because they wanted to boost the morale of the employees. I'd say like I've told you before, I'm giving my full 300%, and it's true. I would, but that's kind of where I'm going with that example. Is just remember you have to do that in order to make it work, because I've also stated this before and I've seen it. People who went to do farming and just couldn't handle it, and boom, gone. They were not they didn't even last but at 1 day out of the week because they realized how much work farming is, and it's work. You got to put the work in to make it happen. Usually when you're working with, like, say an apple orchard, for example, from my synopsis, and say like berry bushes and stuff, it's a little easier. Grapevines have theirs, but like when you're vegetable farming and stuff like that, and you have to manage and stay on top of your weeds, and cattle farming, definitely cattle farming, that is where you have to bring in your muscle and show all your worth, especially if you doing a small cattle farm operation like they did years ago, where you don't have all the fancy baling and loading equipment. Bring the muscle. But anyways, that is going to do it for this video, YouTube folks, and look forward to more videos as I post them. And before I close this out, also I will try to think of some other topics related to farming, maybe, that I can do some videos on, just for y'all who want to get into farming, because I know there's some people that are interested in it, and I said I was going to, in the beginning, like I stated, possibly do some videos on the logistics of farming, and I can do that. And I'll have to look back in my videos, because another one that just came to mind is the logistics of like dairy farming and cattle farming in general, having dairy cows. But I think I'll do the cattle and dairy farm separate if I do, but I don't know if I've done any on those, so if I haven't, I will make videos on that, because I think that would be an interesting topic for some of you, being somebody who's worked with cattle and also worked with dairy cows on farms before that I worked on during high school days, a part of a work program. I can basically give you what I learned of a synopsis on dairy cattle. Now, there's probably a lot of things that have changed since I've worked with dairy cattle or dairy cows and cattle, beef cows, stuff like that. So there might be stuff I'm telling you that's old school, that there might be different ways. So don't fully go off what I say, but for those of you with a small farm that might be doing it the way that I learned, this could be very beneficial to you. And I think most aspects of every farming, there's always going to be some general knowledge that is just basic anyways, that you can't really mess up. It's rocket science. It's just methods change over time as equipment gets better. So anyways, as always, YouTube folks, keep your heads up, stay strong, all that kind of jazz. I hope you have an excellent time, whatever it is, wherever you are, and look forward to more update videos from me. And definitely want to do updates if I get the chickens, like I mentioned in that one video. And the apple orchard, I want to show you once I plant the trees, the setup, so you know the spacing of apple trees if you decide to do it on your property, be it for a business or be it just for having a few of them to just grow for the sake of growing it for a homestead. I will walk you through the steps of the spacing and what you need to know on that, because I've got a little bit of knowledge on that. I've never really planted any apple trees per se, but I've worked on apple orchards and I've gotten the basics of it. So as I'm doing it, we can do it together and I can kind of show you what steps I went through to place mine. And this should be an interesting business venture, by the way, because it'll be my first time ever physically owning my own farm. In general, it being an apple orchard, which will be a unique experience, but it's definitely going to be fun. I can tell you that much. I think it's going to be a lot better than having to do a vineyard or berry farming. Not that I don't like berry farming. I love growing berries, and I may get into that still a little bit. But, and I say berry farming, even though I don't think berry farming's that bad, but after working at a vineyard, I can tell you personally, yeah, this will be a heck of a lot easier. Trees are usually a lot easier to weed around because you can weed whack around them and they're usually pretty hardy and they'll last, versus obviously a grapevine you have to be really delicate with. I can get into logistics on grapevines too for anyone who wants to get into the vineyard, but I highly suggest that you think long and hard before you start yourself a vineyard. And I'm not saying that meanly. It's just also, before I close this out, from experience. My neighbor who has the vineyard up here above where I live, my neighborhood, before he could even sell to the winery, because obviously they're making wine, they want quality grapes. They had to inspect his grapes, and of course they were really good grapes, and he's taken really excellent care of them. But see, that's the thing, is you have to like take expert care of them. And again, I'll get into a video on that maybe someday for people who want to get into owning a vineyard. But just know, it is work. I worked for one, and just working for one taught me a lot about long, hard days. And I just got to a point where it was tiring me out and I was feeling burnt out. And obviously I had some health issues, as I mentioned. And so I had to stop because I just couldn't do it in the hot sun anymore. All the stuff I was doing, and it was a lot of work. That's made me never want to have a physical vineyard as a farm ever. But as always, YouTube folks, sunshine, unicorns, and rainbows, and I will see you in the next video. And if you wouldn't mind, if I haven't mentioned it yet, to like, comment, and subscribe, that would be great. You don't have to comment, but it would be nice to comment to hear your feedback, videos you think I should do other than just farming videos, obviously. And I hope to do updates on some things that will be coming That will help for my antique business, establish me a place, because it's either getting a booth at that place, which I might look into, or possibly doing something on my property, which will involve me building an addition on my shop, which I would love to do anyways for more space, to move my mechanical and all my shop tools to the very back half of the shop. If I build the addition into the addition of the shop, so it'll be a new area for it, and then reconfiguring the front of the shop, the old part, and turning it into the antique retail space slash where people can buy the apples, which I'll have like a little stand where I can put the apples, and I'll have a refrigerator so I can store them so they stay fresh, so they don't rot, and just when I bag them, put them out on my little stand out so people can buy them right from the thing, and reconfigure the doorway and get rid of the garage door and turn it into like a regular door with a little area to display the apples out, probably outside where somebody can walk in and buy them. But then inside it is all antiques, and I'll make that. And I'm thinking about, because of where I live, calling my business Island Apple Orchards, due to the area I live in Vermont. And anyways, I think that will be interesting, and I'll also try to figure out what I'm going to call my antique place and have that all in one. So my Model A Ford pickup will be from my orchard, and if I get the van, if I ever find a van, the right van I want, that will be my antiques van. I was also looking at an old Ford Bronco that would be kind of cool too, but I'd prefer like a van, like a Ford Econoline from the 70s or 80s, as I believe I've mentioned before, or a Ram 350 from like the 70s or 80s, or a 70s or 80s Chevy. I was also looking at an old Ford Club Wagon from the 60s that I might be into, but here I am forgetting that I should end the video and then keep going. But anyways, if you wouldn't mind, as always, like, comment, and subscribe. You don't have to comment. I wouldn't mind your feedback. The video's on, as I stated. And if you were to subscribe and maybe hit the full notification, would be really loved. But even if you hit half, that's fine. Or if you want no notification at all, that's fine too. And if you choose not to subscribe because maybe my videos just aren't it for you, that's not a forced thing. I do not expect people to subscribe to my channel. I just would love if you did. And also know that my channel is never going to be a promotional advertisement. It is never going to be a cash grab. I had mentioned in videos how I thought about at some point maybe making merch, but I don't think that's going to happen, because I don't want to become a cash grab or a commercial advertisement like a lot of YouTube channels end up. And good for them if that's what they want to do for a living, but for me, I just personally don't feel that's right and fair to anyone who subscribes to my channel to feel obligated to support me in a monetary manner by buying my shirts and cups and whatever else weird merchandise I can come up with in my brain, and buy the expensive $30,000 whatever equipment to do so. And on top of that, create all these different accounts with OnlyFans and all that kind of gobbledygook just to make sure my videos are of quality and constantly consistent. So you're paying for a constantly consistent subscription, and that's, like I've stated before in the past, that's not what I'm about, because I don't want to be obligated to YouTube either. So if I ever decide I had enough of YouTube and maybe I just don't really feel like doing it anymore because I'm older and it's just not my thing, older than I am now, I want to be able to walk away from that free and clear, knowing I have no ties. And it's nothing against the people who watch my videos. I'm grateful for you watching my videos, but sometimes people get to that point, and I'm not saying I'm leaving. I'm just stating that. So just, again, know that my videos will never be a franchise. That's never going to happen. I promise you on that. I'm going to hold true to my word and not make it a franchise. But there are other YouTubers I have watched who have kind of gone the franchise way that I admit myself I would probably contribute to if I had the money, just because I feel their content is worthy of contributing. I've ran into YouTubers like that in the past that I feel deserve it. I have watched some YouTubers that are like that I just feel I don't think I would ever donate to, and it's nothing against them. It's just I feel like they've done good for themselves and they've established on YouTube for years, but there's these up and coming ones that I see every once in a while that I feel could use it better because they're trying. And this one other YouTuber, and it's the only one that's been on there for a long time, that I would do her channel because of the fact that she has put out content and inspired me in the electronic field when I first started getting interested in working on old appliances, like small appliances. It was kind of inspiration from her, and one other girl were my main watches for a long, long time and still are. And I believe she was the first YouTube channel I stumbled across. That's why. And the second girl, I might too, because she was the second YouTube channel. And those are the only two that have ever really got me fully interested in electronical stuff. So yeah. But anyways, YouTube folks, I will catch you in the next video. And I hope you liked this. And bye for now.